It really scares me when I read things like this. It scares me to know that there are people out there who think this way. Some people like to disregard this and say, hey, they're probably just trolls. But I say, no, they're not. Because I've met people like this. I've met people on a social level who actually believe, for example, that a gay person is a disease, that if they are gay, it's a disease, and that gay people need to be eradicated. You and me both know, if you've went to any of my videos where I've defended gay marriage, that these type of radical religious fundamentalists are rampant here on the interwebs and in real life too. There are many religious people who are homophobic and who actually believe that being gay is a disease and needs to be eradicated, and that these people need to be killed or off or exterminated because they're in sin or whatever it be. In the same way, this type of behavior towards this autistic child is doing the same behavior that the religious fundamentalists have towards gays. Now, granted, I'm not saying that this person who wrote this letter is in fact religious. We don't know. All that I can really say is that this is disgusting. So if you click the link below, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. An anonymous letter was written to this family who has an autistic child. And this letter, you can go and read it for yourself, was just, I could not believe what I was reading. The fact that this person who wrote this letter is a mother, or claims to have children, and she essentially says that your autistic child would be better off euthanized, in other words, killed off, because the kid is weird, the kid is loud at times, and it creates a disturbance for the neighborhood. And she goes on and rants about how the child shouldn't be allowed to live, and just these terrible, terrible, I would actually say, evil things. Because this is someone, when someone says this about somebody else, I would call them evil. They are people who don't have a moral standard, who don't have an idea of what disabled or handicapped people have to go through. You know, it's not like this child asked to be autistic when he was born. It's not like the mother had a child and wanted the child to be autistic. Handicapped people exist. People who are disabled exist. What this person in this letter doesn't seem to understand, though, is that there are different levels of autism. I guess you would call a low level of autism and a high level of autism. And if they have a high level of autism, they may be very, very loud. And they may be very loud, or you may not be able to, talk to them on a more personal level. I know autistic people who have autism and these types of things, and they function in society perfectly. They have a job, they work, they live on their own, they have a girlfriend. I know people like that who have autism, and just because they have a disability or a handicap does not in any way mean that they should be instantly eradicated because it's an inconvenience for you. People who actually have this sort of demand that, hey, you're a bit too loud, how about we just take you out because, you're an inconvenience, you're an inconvenience to the neighborhood, how about we just get rid of you and kill you because you're not a real human being? I'm sorry, but having worked with autistic children before, when I was religious, I volunteered several times to these things called vacation Bible schools. And I was a leader, a Bible leader, in which kids, I would watch over a group of kids, and I would do activities with them and, teach them Bible crap and all that other shit. Thankfully, I'm no longer religious. But the point is that when I was doing that experience and doing those activities, I was actually, one of my kids that I was working with was autistic. And I can say from personal experience that just because a child is autistic does not mean that it needs to be killed. Does not mean that you get to treat it like absolute garbage. Does not mean that that autistic child does not have value. Does not mean that that autistic child cannot be loved or cared for, just as you or your family or your mom and dad would care for you. And the fact that you actually think, the writer of this letter, that this person doesn't deserve to live and they deserve to be eradicated because they're a nuisance to your neighborhood community. If there's anyone who needs to be euthanized, I think it's you, madam. It's you who needs to be euthanized because you're truly evil to think this way. You're no different than that religious fundamentalist who says being gay is a disease. And we people who are watching this video, what we need to do is we need to talk about and address things like this, because just because someone is autistic does not mean that they're not able to function in society. Again, depending on your level of autism, that can depend. When things like this happen, when people speak out against handicapped or disabled people and say, hey, you know what, you should just be killed, we need to talk about this. We need to address it, because the worst thing we can do is say, oh, this person's just trolling. No, okay, that's a cop-out. Yes, it's the internet. Yes, people do troll. But there's a level of where trolling goes on too far, and I would not classify this as a case of trolling. And what's really weird is that the police who have this letter, they're not classifying this as hate speech. And quite frankly, it is hate speech. I would classify this letter saying that your child should be terminated because he has a handicap of autism. That's hate speech. In my personal opinion, it's just disgusting to me. I've worked with autistic children, and I know that they can be some of the most lovable, understanding children, or even adults for that matter. Do not let instances like this be ignored, because when you do ignore it, it creates more problems and more stereotypes and more misconceptions with people who actually have disabilities and who struggle to make a living with their disability. Think first before you speak.